I'm calling the cops on you right now, you criminal. That is how my HOA president opened our conversation right there on my porch. Her finger jammed into my chest, while red and blue lights exploded through the pine trees behind her. 2 patrol cars slid to a stop on my dirt driveway, like this was some kind of raid. Gravel spraying officers piling out with hands hovering near their belts, and for a second, even I wondered if they were really about to drag me off land I knew I owned. 30 seconds later, the sergeant was saluting me instead of cuffing me, calling me Captain Callahan. In front of everyone, and the look on Marjorie Ashford's face said she finally realized the story she'd been telling about me was about to blow up in her hands. My name is Griffin Callahan. For 15 years, I was a JAG attorney in the military. Contracts, land disputes, people fighting over fences and fine print. I was good at it. But the work left me wired and worn out, always waiting for the next email, the next hearing, the next mess to fix. When I retired, I wanted one thing quiet land that actually belonged to me. No chain of command, no board, no committee. So I bought a little A-frame cabin at the edge of Evergreen County, 2.5 acres of Pines Gravel Drive off a half-forgotten county road. I did not just take the realtor's word for it. I pulled the original deed from 1947, followed the title forward-checked for covenants, hired a surveyor with GPS gear. His report put my parcel about 200 meters outside the nearest lot, in a development called Pine Valley Estates. Different plat, different legal description, no HOA anywhere in my paperwork. For a month, it was exactly what I needed. Fixing porch boards, stacking firewood, drinking coffee on the steps, while the forest breathed around me. For the first time in years, nobody told me where to park or when to show up. You know that feeling when your shoulders finally drop and you realize how tense you've been for years. Then one Tuesday morning, I heard an engine on the driveway that did not belong to any of my few distant neighbors. A bright red SUV crept up the gravel way too polished for that road. Out stepped a woman in a black blazer and heels that immediately sank into the mud, hair sprayed into place, clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge. She smiled tight and called out, "Good morning, I'm Marjorie Ashford, President of the Pine Valley Estates Homeowners Association. You must be our new property owner up here." I set the axe down, wiped my hands, walked over. "Morning. I'm Griffin," I said. She didn't take my hand, just clicked her pen. "We need to get you registered with the HOA and collect your annual dues. It's $2,400 a year, and you're already 2 months behind since you moved in without notifying us." She said it like it was a done deal. I actually laughed. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice calm. "This parcel isn't in Pine Valley Estates. It sits outside your boundary line. I've got the deed and the survey inside, if you'd like to see them." Her smile thinned. "Every property in this area falls under HOA governance," she said. "We've managed this community for 15 years. Everyone pays dues." "Everyone inside your development," I corrected. "I'm not." I brought out my leather folder, laid the deed county map and survey on the hood of my truck. She glanced at the first page for maybe 5 seconds, snapped the folder shut with 2 fingers, like it offended her, and said, "You can't just opt out because you feel like it. You'll be hearing from our legal committee." Then she turned on her heel, climbed back into her SUV, and left deep ruts all the way back to the road. Standing there in my driveway, I told myself it would sort itself out. She'd call the county, hear the same thing I'd heard, and this would be a mildly annoying story I told someday. You know what I mean. You just assume reasonable adults will be reasonable. A week later, my inbox told me I'd been wrong. Subject line, "Violation notice, property non-compliance." According to Marjorie, my cabin paint color was not approved. My firewood stack was visible from the road my truck was parked in an unapproved location, and my landscaping did not meet community standards. It quoted sections and subsections from a covenant book that had nothing to do with me. I sat at my kitchen table, read it twice, then replied with attached scans of my deed and survey explaining my parcel was not part of Pine Valley Estates and asking her to correct her records. No response. Just another violation notice a few days later, then another and another, each one more aggressive in tone. My phone buzzing with final warning became background noise. That's when I started saving everything, building a little archive in a folder on my laptop, half out of habit, half out of self-defense. Then she took it public. My first clue came when my truck died on the main road, and a man I'd never seen before pulled over with jumper cables. He was friendly for about 30 seconds. Then he squinted at me and asked, "Can I ask you something? Are you the guy squatting on HOA land up the ridge? I honestly thought I'd misheard him." He showed me his phone. On the Pine Valley community page, there was a photo of my cabin taken from the road and circled in red with a long caption from President Marjorie A., describing me as a hostile outsider, illegally occupying HOA common property, refusing to pay dues, refusing to follow safety standards, threatening legal action against anyone who tried to enforce the rules. Hundreds of people had seen it. The comments full of outrage, and nobody had talked to me once. I pulled up my deed on my own phone, tried to explain, but you could see him check out. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of it," he said, and drove off, leaving me standing in the cold with a dead truck and a story I didn't recognize being told about me. After that, the mood around me changed. Someone dumped a bag of garbage at the end of my driveway. A sign on the county road near my turnoff got sprayed with "Pay your dues." Cars slowed when they passed the cabin, people pointing, taking pictures. One afternoon, an older woman literally stood in front of my truck with her arms spread and asked, voice shaking, "Are you a criminal? Because Marjorie says you're dangerous?" So there I was in my own driveway, calmly explaining to a stranger that I was not a squatter or a threat. I was a retired military lawyer who had bought land outside an HOA that did not want to accept boundaries. The humiliation and anger from that stuck with me. The morning that really changed everything started like any other. Coffee quiet, a cold sky. About 6 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the cameras I'd installed around the property. I opened the live feed and watched a red SUV pull up. Two guys in work jackets get out with a post hole digger and a big metal sign, and Marjorie stand there, pointing at a spot clearly on my side of the boundary marker. 11 minutes later, they drove away, and I had a new decoration in my yard. Pine Valley Estates HOA property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Staring at that sign planted in my ground flipped a switch in my head. This wasn't confusion anymore. This was someone trying to rewrite my deed with a stake and some paint. I yanked it out of the earth, tossed it in my truck, drove straight to the county sheriff's office, and handed a deputy both the sign and a thumb drive with the footage. He watched it, shook his head, and said, "Looks like a civil property dispute, sir. You may have to settle this in court." "Fine," I told him, "but log it, give me a case number." Then I called an attorney. We sent Marjorie a certified cease and desist letter that laid out everything. The emails, the public post, the trespassing, the sign, the fact that my parcel sat outside her jurisdiction according to county records. We told her that if she kept going, we would file both criminal complaints and a civil lawsuit. She signed for the letter. I have the little green card with her signature on it." She did not back off. She hosted an HOA meeting where she called me the trespasser in our midst and passed out flyers with my cabin circled like a crime scene, and neighbors quietly started telling me stories about fines for fence colors, trucks, garden beds. It was pretty clear I was just the latest person she'd decided to steamroll. So I did what I know how to do. I built a real case. I printed every email, every flyer, every screenshot where she called me a squatter or a criminal. I downloaded and labeled camera clips of her and her associates on my property without permission. I went back to the county recorder and got it in writing that she had asked about my parcel and had been told there were no HOA covenants attached. I had my surveyor update his report with clear photos and coordinates. Then, through my attorney, I gave her one last off-ramp: retract the lies, apologize. In the same places you posted them. Stay off my land, and I won't sue you personally. Her reply was short and ugly. You don't have the resources to sue me. You don't have the connections to win in this county. I will bury you in legal fees before you ever see the inside of a courtroom. At that point, all I had to do was stay patient and let her make the next move. That next move was the night she called 911 on me. It was bitter cold, my breath coming out in white clouds, when she pulled up fast in that red SUV, out in a fur-trimmed coat, and marched straight up my steps. "I'm calling the cops on you right now, you criminal," she yelled, jabbing my chest while my cameras recorded every second. She told the dispatcher I was illegally occupying HOA land, that I was hostile, that she was afraid. I stood there with my coffee in one hand, my leather folder under my arm, and waited. Sirens hit the trees a few minutes later, and 2 patrol cars slid into my driveway, lights spinning. 4 officers stepped out. The older one, with sergeant stripes on his sleeve, walked up, shined his flashlight in my face, and asked, "Sir, can I get your name?" "Griffin Callahan," I said. "Do you have documentation for this property?" he asked. "Yes, Sergeant," I said, and handed him the folder. He flipped through the deed, the survey, the county printouts, and then his eyes narrowed just a little. "Callahan," he said slowly. "Did you serve in the JAG Corps at Fort Bragg?" I nodded. I did. His whole posture changed. "You handled my brother's discharge review," he said quietly. "You got his status changed so he could get his benefits." Then, right there on my icy driveway with Marjorie watching, he shifted his flashlight to his left hand and raised his right in a crisp salute. Old reflexes kicked in. I returned it, and the entire mood shifted. He watched one of the clips of her planting the sign, listened to my short version of the past 6 months, then turned to her and said calmly, "Ma'am, everything I see says this property belongs to Mr. Callahan and has never been under your HOA. Making a false report to 911 is serious. At this point, he's the one who has grounds to file a complaint." He looked back at me. "Do you want to?" I thought about the trash, the spray paint, the shaking old woman, the nights I'd sat up organizing evidence instead of sleeping. "Yes, Sergeant," I said. "I do." By the next day, a shaky cell phone video of that whole scene was circulating in the Pine Valley group. People heard her scream, heard him call me. Captain saw the salute, watched the balance flip in real time, and the comments shifted from, "Get him out," to, "What else has she lied about?" Neighbors started dropping by my cabin with apologies and their own stories about being fined and threatened over tiny things. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, dug through their accounts, and discovered Marjorie had been spending HOA money on her personal war against me without approval. They voted her out as president. A "for sale" sign went up in front of her house. If this had been a movie, the credits could have rolled right there. But people who are addicted to control usually have one more bad decision left in them. A couple of weeks later at 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed again with a motion alert. I opened the camera feed and saw her in dark clothes with a hood up, carrying a battery-powered chainsaw in one hand and a can of spray paint in the other, walking up my driveway like a ghost that hadn't gotten the memo. On my screen, I watched her cut down a row of fence posts, wood splintering in the cold, then walk up to my cabin wall and spray big red letters, "This is our land." I could have gone outside, but confronting someone in that state with a running chainsaw in her hands in the dark felt like a good way to end up on the wrong side of the news. So I stayed inside, let the cameras roll, and called 911. 7 minutes later, those same red and blue lights washed over the clearing again. Sergeant Holbrook stepped out, took one look at the destroyed fence, the fresh paint, and Marjorie standing there, shaking. "Ms. Ashford," he said, sounding more tired than angry. "What are you doing here?" Her voice broke. "He took everything from me," she said. "My position, my reputation, my home. I just wanted him to know what it feels like when someone takes what's yours." Holbrook shook his head, told her to turn around and put her hands behind her back. And this time, she didn't argue. 6 weeks later, we saw each other again in a courtroom instead of a driveway. The district attorney laid out the charges: trespass, vandalism, false report harassment, and walked the judge through my evidence. Deed County file survey. 6 months of emails and posts and videos. The midnight 911 call, the 3 a.m. chainsaw. I answered questions, kept it to facts and dates. Her attorney asked if I could have avoided all of it by just paying the dues and going along. And I told the judge, honestly, that if I had done that, I'd be admitting that anyone with a title and a loud voice could override recorded property rights, and that is not how the law is supposed to work. The judge agreed. She told Marjorie this was not one mistake. It was a pattern of ignoring the truth and abusing the authority her neighbors had given her. She found her guilty, sentenced her to probation, and community service ordered fines and restitution for the damage to my property, and put a restraining order in place so she can't come near me or my land. In a separate civil ruling, Marjorie had to retract her posts and pay damages for defamation. Walking out of that courthouse, I didn't feel like I'd crushed an enemy. I felt like the ground under my feet had finally stopped moving. That night, I sat on my porch again, with a mug of coffee. Looked at the new fence posts, the clean cabin wall, the same dark pines, and thought about how close I'd come to just writing a check and surrendering my rights to buy a little quiet. I'm glad I didn't. Property rights don't mean much if they vanish the moment someone waves a fine in your face. Sometimes standing up for yourself looks less like a dramatic showdown and more like folders' timestamps and the patience to let the system catch up to the truth. So let me ask you, do you think what happened to Marjorie was fair, or did it go too far? Should the board have tried to protect her, or was it past time someone with a title learned their power had limits? If this had been your cabin, your land, would you have fought the way I did, or would you have folded just to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments. Share your own HOA horror stories, or times when someone in power tried to push you around. And if you want more stories like this, hit like subscribe, and send this to the friend who is arguing with their HOA right now, because sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply know your rights and refuse to let anyone talk you out of them.